Hello, and welcome back to the Narrative Reading Bible Podcast. My name is Jessica Hutton, and I am excited that you all are continuing our reading of Book 1, Paths to Promise. Today, we are going to begin reading the Book of Leviticus, which begins at page 159 of the Narrative Reading Bible. Enjoy today's reading.
Introduction to Leviticus. The Book of Leviticus advances the Bible's metanarrative of creation, fall, redemption, and restoration by detailing how Israel, as a sinful people, can maintain a relationship with a holy God. Following the establishment of the covenant at Mount Sinai, Leviticus provides essential instructions for how a nation set apart by God is to live, worship, and reflect His character. Through laws on sacrifices, moral conduct, and purity, Leviticus teaches Israel what it means to be a holy people, dedicated to a holy God. Leviticus continues the covenant framework established in Exodus, focusing on how Israel can embody the identity of a kingdom of priests and a holy nation. Exodus 19:6. The call to holiness runs throughout the book, establishing that every aspect of life, personal conduct, communal relationships, and worship practices, is to be governed by a commitment to God. The phrase, "Be holy, for I am holy," Leviticus 19:2, captures this principle, revealing that Israel's distinctiveness is rooted in their relationship with a holy God. In doing so, Leviticus points back to the ideals of creation, where humanity was made in God's image to live in harmony with Him and each other. Though sin introduced disorder and separation, Leviticus provides Israel with a structured way of life that brings them closer to God's original design. The holiness laws, by setting boundaries around moral and ceremonial practices, serve as a partial restoration of humanity's intended role in reflecting God's order, justice, and compassion. At the same time, Leviticus addresses the reality of sin and impurity, which create barriers between God and humanity. Through various sacrifices, sin offerings, guilt offerings, and burnt offerings, the book provides a system for cleansing and atonement, recognizing that humanity's fallen nature requires a means to bridge the gap between a sinful people and a holy God. The sacrificial system emphasizes both the cost of sin and the grace of God's provision for forgiveness, underscoring the consequences of the fall and the need for continual purification. The Day of Atonement, Yom Kippur, serves as a powerful example of this system. On this day, the high priest offers sacrifices for the sins of the entire community, symbolically transferring their guilt onto a scapegoat that is then sent into the wilderness. This ritual highlights the concept of substitutionary atonement, foreshadowing the coming of Jesus Christ, who would be the ultimate and final sacrifice for humanity's sin. The sacrificial system in Leviticus provides Israel with a temporary solution to the problem of sin, allowing them to approach God and live in His presence. However, the need for repeated sacrifices reveals the limitations of the system and points toward a greater, more permanent solution. In the New Testament, Jesus is revealed as the fulfillment of Levitical sacrifices. His death on the cross offers complete and final atonement, abolishing the need for animal sacrifices and the mediation of human priests. By becoming the true and perfect high priest, Jesus establishes a new covenant where believers can approach God directly, fully redeemed and cleansed from sin. Leviticus thus lays the theological groundwork for understanding redemption through sacrifice and mediation. The sacrificial system, while no longer practiced, teaches the importance of a substitute to bear the weight of sin, a concept foundational to understanding Christ's work. Through His death and resurrection, Jesus removes the barriers symbolized in Leviticus, making Himself the true temple and mediator, where all believers encounter God. Beyond its sacrificial laws, Leviticus emphasizes the importance of holiness in both personal and communal life. The call to holiness not only shapes Israel's identity, but also guides their ethical conduct in relation to one another. Instructions regarding justice, compassion, and care for the vulnerable, such as the poor, the stranger, and the widow, reflect God's desire for a community grounded in His character. These principles encourage integrity, kindness, and social responsibility, showing that holiness is not limited to ritual purity, but extends to how one treats others. The communal ethics outlined in Leviticus remain relevant for New Testament believers, who are called to live as a holy priesthood, 1 Peter 2:5, and reflect God's justice and compassion in their communities. This focus on holiness in relationships aligns with the Bible's broader theme of restoration, as God seeks to create a people who live out His values and exemplify His character in the world. Through the tabernacle and the sacrificial rituals, Leviticus instructs Israel on the proper way to approach God in worship. The sacred duties of the priests and the strict regulations regarding offerings underscore that worship must be approached with reverence and respect. This aspect of Leviticus reminds believers of the need for spiritual preparation, purity, and humility in their relationship with God. While New Testament worship does not require the Levitical sacrificial system, the principles of reverence and purity in worship remain timeless. Believers are encouraged to offer their bodies as a living sacrifice, holy and pleasing to God. Romans 12:1, reflecting the spirit of worship and self-offering that Leviticus exemplifies. While the literal observance of Levitical sacrifices has been rendered obsolete by Christ's atoning work, Leviticus retains its relevance as a symbol and foreshadowing of Jesus. The sacrificial laws and rituals highlight the seriousness of sin and the necessity of atonement, pointing forward to Jesus as the ultimate high priest and perfect sacrifice. Through His once-for-all sacrifice, Christ fulfills the requirements of the law and reconciles humanity to God, completing the redemptive arc that Leviticus initiates. For believers, Leviticus serves as a reminder of the depth of God's holiness and the weight of His grace. It anticipates the greater work of redemption accomplished by Christ and the restoration of intimate fellowship between God and humanity. The themes of Leviticus, holiness, sacrifice, atonement, and reverence, find their ultimate expression and fulfillment in Jesus, who brings complete reconciliation and restores the broken relationship between God and His people. Leviticus. Then the Lord called to Moses and spoke to him from the tent of meeting, saying, "Speak to the Israelites and tell them, when any of you brings an offering to the Lord, you may bring as your offering an animal from the herd or the flock. If one's offering is a burnt offering from the herd, he is to present an unblemished male. He must bring it to the entrance to the tent of meeting for its acceptance before the Lord. He is to lay his hand on the head of the burnt offering, so it can be accepted on his behalf, to make atonement for him. And he shall slaughter the young bull before the Lord, and Aaron's sons the priests are to present the blood and sprinkle it on all sides of the altar at the entrance to the tent of meeting. Next, he is to skin the burnt offering and cut it into pieces. The sons of Aaron the priest shall put a fire on the altar and arrange wood on the fire. Then Aaron's sons the priests are to arrange the pieces, including the head and the fat, atop the burning wood on the altar. The entrails and legs must be washed with water, and the priest shall burn all of it on the altar as a burnt offering, an offering made by fire, a pleasing aroma to the Lord. If, however, one's offering is a burnt offering from the flock, from the sheep or goats, he is to present an unblemished male. He shall slaughter it on the north side of the altar before the Lord. And Aaron's sons the priests are to sprinkle its blood against the altar on all sides. He is to cut the animal into pieces, and the priest shall arrange them, including the head and fat, atop the burning wood that is on the altar. The entrails and legs must be washed with water, and the priest shall bring all of it and burn it on the altar. It is a burnt offering, an offering made by fire, a pleasing aroma to the Lord. If instead, one's offering to the Lord is a burnt offering of birds, he is to present a turtle dove or a young pigeon. Then the priest shall bring it to the altar, twist off its head, and burn it on the altar. Its blood should be drained out on the side of the altar. And he is to remove the crop with its contents and throw it to the east side of the altar, in the place for ashes. He shall tear it open by its wings, without dividing the bird completely. And the priest is to burn it on the altar atop the burning wood. It is a burnt offering, an offering made by fire, a pleasing aroma to the Lord. When anyone brings a grain offering to the Lord, his offering must consist of fine flour. He is to pour olive oil on it, put frankincense on it, and bring it to Aaron's sons the priests. The priest shall take a handful of the flour and oil, together with all the frankincense, and burn this as a memorial portion on the altar, an offering made by fire, a pleasing aroma to the Lord. The remainder of the grain offering shall belong to Aaron and his sons. It is a most holy part of the offerings made by fire to the Lord. Now, if you bring an offering of grain baked in an oven, it must consist of fine flour, either unleavened cakes mixed with oil or unleavened wafers coated with oil. If your offering is a grain offering prepared on a griddle, it must be unleavened bread made of fine flour mixed with oil. Crumble it and pour oil on it. It is a grain offering. If your offering is a grain offering cooked in a pan, it must consist of fine flour with oil. When you bring to the Lord the grain offering made in any of these ways, it is to be presented to the priest, and he shall take it to the altar. The priest is to remove the memorial portion from the grain offering and burn it on the altar as an offering made by fire, a pleasing aroma to the Lord. But the remainder of the grain offering shall belong to Aaron and his sons. It is a most holy part of the offerings, made by fire to the Lord. No grain offering that you present to the Lord may be made with leaven, for you are not to burn any leaven or honey as an offering made by fire to the Lord. You may bring them to the Lord as an offering of first fruits, but they are not to be offered on the altar as a pleasing aroma. And you shall season each of your grain offerings with salt. You must not leave the salt of the covenant of your God out of your grain offering. You are to add salt to each of your offerings. If you bring a grain offering of first fruits to the Lord, you shall offer crushed heads of new grain roasted on the fire, and you are to put oil and frankincense on it. It is a grain offering. The priest shall then burn the memorial portion of the crushed grain and the oil, together with all its frankincense, as an offering made by fire to the Lord. If one's offering is a peace offering, and he offers an animal from the herd, whether male or female, he must present it without blemish before the Lord. He is to lay his hand on the head of the offering and slaughter it at the entrance to the tent of meeting. Then Aaron's sons, the priests, shall sprinkle the blood on all sides of the altar. From the peace offering, he is to bring an offering made by fire to the Lord, the fat that covers the entrails, all the fat that is on them, both kidneys with the fat on them near the loins, and the lobe of the liver, which he is to remove with the kidneys. Then Aaron's sons are to burn it on the altar atop the burnt offering that is on the burning wood, as an offering made by fire, a pleasing aroma to the Lord. If, however, one's peace offering to the Lord is from the flock, he must present a male or female without blemish. If he is presenting a lamb for his offering, he must present it before the Lord. He is to lay his hand on the head of his offering and slaughter it in front of the tent of meeting. Then Aaron's sons shall sprinkle its blood on all sides of the altar. And from the peace offering he shall bring an offering made by fire to the Lord, consisting of its fat, the entire fat tail, cut off close to the backbone, the fat that covers the entrails, all the fat that is on them, both kidneys with the fat on them near the loins, and the lobe of the liver, which he is to remove with the kidneys. Then the priest is to burn them on the altar as food, an offering made by fire to the Lord. If one's offering is a goat, he is to present it before the Lord. He must lay his hand on its head and slaughter it in front of the tent of meeting. Then Aaron's sons shall sprinkle its blood on all sides of the altar. And from his offering he shall present an offering made by fire to the Lord, the fat that covers the entrails, all the fat that is on them, both kidneys with the fat on them near the loins, and the lobe of the liver, which he is to remove with the kidneys. Then the priest is to burn the food on the altar as an offering made by fire, a pleasing aroma. All the fat is the Lord's. This is a permanent statute for the generations to come. Wherever you live, you must not eat any fat or any blood. Then the Lord said to Moses, "Tell the Israelites to do as follows with one who sins unintentionally against any of the Lord's commandments and does what is forbidden by them. If the anointed priest sins, bringing guilt on the people, he must bring to the Lord a young bull without blemish as a sin offering for the sin he has committed. He must bring the bull to the entrance to the tent of meeting before the Lord, lay his hand on the bull's head, and slaughter it before the Lord. Then the anointed priest shall take some of the bull's blood and bring it into the tent of meeting. The priest is to dip his finger in the blood and sprinkle some of it 7 times before the Lord in front of the veil of the sanctuary. The priest must then put some of the blood on the horns of the altar of fragrant incense that is before the Lord in the tent of meeting. And he is to pour out the rest of the bull's blood at the base of the altar of burnt offering, at the entrance to the tent of meeting. Then he shall remove all the fat from the bull of the sin offering, the fat that covers the entrails, all the fat that is on them, both kidneys with the fat on them near the loins, and the lobe of the liver, which he is to remove with the kidneys, just as the fat is removed from the ox of the peace offering. Then the priest shall burn them on the altar of burnt offering. But the hide of the bull and all its flesh, with its head and legs and its entrails and dung, all the rest of the bull, he must take outside the camp to a ceremonially clean place where the ashes are poured out. And there he must burn it on a wood fire, on the ash heap. Now if the whole congregation of Israel strays unintentionally, and the matter escapes the notice of the assembly, so that they violate any of the Lord's commandments, and incur guilt by doing what is forbidden, when they become aware of the sin they have committed, then the assembly must bring a young bull as a sin offering and present it before the tent of meeting. The elders of the congregation are to lay their hands on the bull's head before the Lord, and it shall be slaughtered before the Lord. Then the anointed priest is to bring some of the bull's blood into the tent of meeting, and he is to dip his finger in the blood and sprinkle it 7 times before the Lord in front of the veil. He is also to put some of the blood on the horns of the altar that is before the Lord in the tent of meeting, and he must pour out the rest of the blood at the base of the altar of burnt offering, at the entrance to the tent of meeting. And he is to remove all the fat from it and burn it on the altar. He shall offer this bull, just as he did the bull for the sin offering. In this way the priest will make atonement on their behalf, and they will be forgiven. Then he is to take the bull outside the camp and burn it, just as he burned the first bull. It is the sin offering for the assembly. When a leader sins unintentionally and does what is prohibited by any of the commandments of the Lord his God, he incurs guilt. When he becomes aware of the sin he has committed, he must bring an unblemished male goat as his offering. He is to lay his hand on the head of the goat and slaughter it at the place where the burnt offering is slaughtered before the Lord. It is a sin offering. Then the priest is to take some of the blood of the sin offering with his finger, put it on the horns of the altar of burnt offering, and pour out the rest of the blood at the base of the altar. He must burn all its fat on the altar, like the fat of the peace offerings. Thus the priest will make atonement for that man's sin, and he will be forgiven. And if one of the common people sins unintentionally and does what is prohibited by any of the Lord's commandments, he incurs guilt. When he becomes aware of the sin he has committed, he must bring an unblemished female goat as his offering for that sin. He is to lay his hand on the head of the sin offering and slaughter it at the place of the burnt offering. Then the priest is to take some of its blood with his finger, put it on the horns of the altar of burnt offering, and pour out the rest of the blood at the base of the altar. Then he is to remove all the fat, just as it is removed from the peace offering, and the priest is to burn it on the altar as a pleasing aroma to the Lord. In this way the priest will make atonement for him, and he will be forgiven. If, however, he brings a lamb as a sin offering, he must bring an unblemished female, and he is to lay his hand on the head of the sin offering and slaughter it as a sin offering at the place where the burnt offering is slaughtered. Then the priest is to take some of the blood of the sin offering with his finger, put it on the horns of the altar of burnt offering, and pour out the rest of its blood at the base of the altar. And he shall remove all the fat, just as the fat of the lamb is removed from the peace offerings, and he shall burn it on the altar along with the offerings made by fire to the Lord. In this way, the priest will make atonement for him for the sin he has committed, and he will be forgiven. If someone sins by failing to testify when he hears a public charge about something he has witnessed, whether he has seen it or learned of it, he shall bear the iniquity. Or if a person touches anything unclean, whether the carcass of any unclean wild animal or livestock or crawling creature, even if he is unaware of it, he is unclean and guilty. Or if he touches human uncleanness, anything by which one becomes unclean, even if he is unaware of it, when he realizes it, he is guilty. Or if someone swears thoughtlessly with his lips, to do anything good or evil, in whatever matter a man may rashly pronounce an oath, even if he is unaware of it, when he realizes it, he is guilty in the matter. If someone incurs guilt in one of these ways, he must confess the sin he has committed, and he must bring his guilt offering to the Lord for the sin he has committed, a female lamb or goat from the flock as a sin offering. And the priest will make atonement for him concerning his sin. If, however, he cannot afford a lamb, he may bring to the Lord as restitution for his sin 2 turtle doves or 2 young pigeons, one as a sin offering, and the other as a burnt offering. He is to bring them to the priest, who shall first present the one for the sin offering. He is to twist its head at the front of its neck without severing it. Then he is to sprinkle some of the blood of the sin offering on the side of the altar, while the rest of the blood is drained out at the base of the altar. It is a sin offering, and the priest must prepare the second bird as a burnt offering, according to the ordinance. In this way the priest will make atonement for him for the sin he has committed, and he will be forgiven. But if he cannot afford 2 turtle doves or 2 young pigeons, he may bring 1/10 of an ephah of fine flour as a sin offering. He must not put olive oil or frankincense on it, because it is a sin offering. He is to bring it to the priest, who shall take a handful from it as a memorial portion, and burn it on the altar atop the offerings made by fire to the Lord. It is a sin offering. In this way, the priest will make atonement for him for any of these sins he has committed, and he will be forgiven. The remainder will belong to the priest, like the grain offering. Then the Lord said to Moses, "If someone acts unfaithfully and sins unintentionally against any of the Lord's holy things, he must bring his guilt offering to the Lord, an unblemished ram from the flock, of proper value in silver shekels, according to the sanctuary shekel. It is a guilt offering. Regarding any holy thing he has harmed, he must make restitution by adding 1/5 of its value to it, and giving it to the priest, who will make atonement on his behalf, with the ram as a guilt offering, and he will be forgiven. If someone sins and violates any of the Lord's commandments, even though he was unaware, he is guilty and shall bear his punishment. He is to bring to the priest an unblemished ram of proper value from the flock as a guilt offering. Then the priest will make atonement on his behalf for the wrong he has committed in ignorance, and he will be forgiven. It is a guilt offering. He was certainly guilty before the Lord." And the Lord said to Moses, "If someone sins and acts unfaithfully against the Lord by deceiving his neighbor in regard to a deposit or security entrusted to him or stolen, or if he extorts his neighbor or finds lost property and lies about it and swears falsely, or if he commits any such sin that a man might commit, once he has sinned and becomes guilty, he must return what he has stolen or taken by extortion, or the deposit entrusted to him, or the lost property he found, or anything else about which he has sworn falsely. He must make restitution in full, add 1/5 of the value, and pay it to the owner on the day he acknowledges his guilt. Then he must bring to the priest his guilt offering to the Lord, an unblemished ram of proper value from the flock. In this way, the priest will make atonement for him before the Lord, and he will be forgiven for anything he may have done to incur guilt." Then the Lord said to Moses, "Command Aaron and his sons that this is the law of the burnt offering. The burnt offering is to remain on the hearth of the altar all night until morning, and the fire must be kept burning on the altar, and the priest shall put on his linen robe and linen undergarments, and he shall remove from the altar the ashes of the burnt offering that the fire has consumed, and place them beside it. Then he must take off his garments, put on other clothes, and carry the ashes outside the camp to a ceremonially clean place. The fire on the altar shall be kept burning. It must not be extinguished. Every morning the priest is to add wood to the fire, arrange the burnt offering on it, and burn the fat portions of the peace offerings on it. The fire shall be kept burning on the altar continually. It must not be extinguished. Now this is the law of the grain offering. Aaron's sons shall present it before the Lord in front of the altar. The priest is to remove a handful of fine flour and olive oil, together with all the frankincense from the grain offering, and burn the memorial portion on the altar as a pleasing aroma to the Lord. Aaron and his sons are to eat the remainder. It must be eaten without leaven in a holy place. They are to eat it in the courtyard of the tent of meeting. It must not be baked with leaven. I have assigned it as their portion of my offerings made by fire. It is most holy, like the sin offering and the guilt offering. Any male among the sons of Aaron may eat it. This is a permanent portion from the offerings made by fire to the Lord for the generations to come. Anything that touches them will become holy. Then the Lord said to Moses, "This is the offering that Aaron and his sons must present to the Lord on the day he is anointed. 1/10 of an ephah of fine flour as a regular grain offering, half of it in the morning and half in the evening. It shall be prepared with oil on a griddle. You are to bring it well kneaded, and present it as a grain offering broken in pieces, a pleasing aroma to the Lord. The priest, who is one of Aaron's sons, and will be anointed to take his place, is to prepare it. As a permanent portion for the Lord, it must be burned completely. Every grain offering for a priest shall be burned completely. It is not to be eaten." And the Lord said to Moses, "Tell Aaron and his sons that this is the law of the sin offering. In the place where the burnt offering is slaughtered, the sin offering shall be slaughtered before the Lord. It is most holy. The priest who offers it shall eat it. It must be eaten in a holy place, in the courtyard of the tent of meeting. Anything that touches its flesh will become holy. And if any of the blood is spattered on a garment, you must wash it in a holy place. The clay pot in which the sin offering is boiled must be broken. If it is boiled in a bronze pot, the pot must be scoured and rinsed with water. Any male among the priests may eat it. It is most holy. But no sin offering may be eaten if its blood has been brought into the tent of meeting to make atonement in the holy place. It must be burned. Now, this is the law of the guilt offering, which is most holy. The guilt offering must be slaughtered in the place where the burnt offering is slaughtered, and the priest shall sprinkle its blood on all sides of the altar, and all of the fat from it shall be offered, the fat tail, the fat that covers the entrails, both kidneys with the fat on them near the loins, and the lobe of the liver, which is to be removed with the kidneys. The priest shall burn them on the altar as an offering made by fire to the Lord. It is a guilt offering. Every male among the priests may eat of it. It must be eaten in a holy place. It is most holy. The guilt offering is like the sin offering. The same law applies to both. It belongs to the priest who makes atonement with it. As for the priest who presents a burnt offering for anyone, the hide of that offering belongs to him. Likewise, every grain offering that is baked in an oven or cooked in a pan or on a griddle belongs to the priest who presents it. And every grain offering, whether dry or mixed with oil, belongs equally to all the sons of Aaron. Now this is the law of the peace offering that one may present to the Lord. If he offers it in thanksgiving, then along with the sacrifice of thanksgiving, he shall offer unleavened cakes mixed with olive oil, unleavened wafers coated with oil, and well-kneaded cakes of fine flour mixed with oil. Along with his peace offering of thanksgiving, he is to present an offering with cakes of leavened bread. From the cakes he must present one portion of each offering as a contribution to the Lord. It belongs to the priest, who sprinkles the blood of the peace offering. The meat of the sacrifice of his peace offering of thanksgiving must be eaten on the day he offers it. None of it may be left until morning. If, however, the sacrifice he offers is a vow or a free will offering, it shall be eaten on the day he presents his sacrifice, but the remainder may be eaten on the next day. But any meat of the sacrifice remaining until the third day must be burned up. If any of the meat from his peace offering is eaten on the third day, it will not be accepted. It will not be credited to the one who presented it. It shall be an abomination, and the one who eats of it shall bear his iniquity. Meat that touches anything unclean must not be eaten. It is to be burned up. As for any other meat, anyone who is ceremonially clean may eat it. But if anyone who is unclean eats meat from the peace offering that belongs to the Lord, that person must be cut off from his people. If one touches anything unclean, whether human uncleanness, an unclean animal, or any unclean detestable thing, and then eats any of the meat of the peace offering that belongs to the Lord, that person must be cut off from his people. Then the Lord said to Moses, "Speak to the Israelites and say, 'You are not to eat any of the fat of an ox, a sheep, or a goat. The fat of an animal found dead or mauled by wild beasts may be used for any other purpose, but you must not eat it. If anyone eats the fat of an animal from which an offering made by fire may be presented to the Lord, the one who eats it must be cut off from his people. You must not eat the blood of any bird or animal in any of your dwellings. If anyone eats blood, that person must be cut off from his people.